Welcome to the Macworld Podcast. I'm Roman Loyola. Joining us on the remote, Jason Cross. Hi, Jason.
Hello.
In studio with Leif Johnson.
Howdy, everyone.
And Dan Masuoka, the most important man in the room.
Hello, hello.
So today, welcome to the Macworld Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about anything Apple related, technology related. Today's show, we're going to talk about AMD and Apple. We're also going to talk about iPhone sales, in particular, things that may have influenced the sale of particular iPhones. There was a story that came out, was it yesterday?
I believe.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, the days are a blur for me. At the beginning of the year, I took first week of January off, so now I'm still kind of like, where am I? What am I doing? One thing that was maybe not considered when it came to what influenced iPhone sales.
It was Monday, if that matters.
Well, yeah, it was Monday. What possibly influenced? So Apple's been saying that China's what screwed up our sales.
Yeah.
But one thing that kind of came up was that, Apple last year ran this year-long iPhone battery replacement program for
$29.
$29. That's a pretty good deal.
Yep.
And, factor that in with the idea that people aren't upgrading their phones as often as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
Could factor into the sale of current iPhones.
Yeah, I think they said the report said something like it was more than 5 times, something like 8 times as many battery replacements as they usually do a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Which of course makes sense because everybody got mad about the battery warning, like the slowing down the phones thing, because Apple didn't communicate that well. It's this whole big ripple effect. They messed up communicating what they were doing with the phone slowing down so that your phone doesn't shut down. Right. And that got everybody mad about the battery thing. So they offered these cheap battery replacements. So they replaced 8 times as many batteries, and then everybody kept their phone.
Yeah.
And you have all these people saying, that, well, it's at 90%. I'm going to still go in and get a replacement.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like, my phone can barely run anymore. It was people preparing for the future because,
And plus it was so cheap.
Yeah, it's $29. I knew someone that still wouldn't get her phone battery replaced. An iPhone 6. And she still wouldn't get that thing replaced, even with $29. It's like, sorry.
Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah. And then also iOS 12 really pushed making old devices run faster.
Yes.
That was a big part of it. It was the first thing they talked about, actually, when they announced iOS 12. Performance, especially on old devices. And it really does feel a lot snappier. Yeah. So I think when you add all those things together, everybody got that stuff by the time the new iPhones came out. And then they thought, well, maybe I don't need a new iPhone. I just got a new battery,
right? And
now it runs faster. And then they thought, maybe I'm not going to upgrade this year.
So Apple's problem is customer satisfaction. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can personally say, so I finally got my 2 sons' phones this year, and I bought my youngest son an iPhone 7. That's what he wanted. And then I was going to buy my older son a new phone, but I was like, oh, wait a minute, I can just take my old 6S Plus and replace the battery. And he wanted a bigger phone anyways. And, they use Instagram and all these social apps. So it's not, and he doesn't really game with it a lot. So it's not like he needed the top performing phone.
Yeah,
so he was happy with the 6S Plus. And I was like, well, I only have to upgrade that battery for $29 instead of buying a new phone. So, so I was one of those people who upgraded. Well, I actually did both then.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
But so it was $29. It was a good deal, and it was the only problem for me was I had to go in twice to get it because they were so backed up of doing these battery replacements that I had to go drop it off. I couldn't just wait. They had me come in again and pick it up. So, but that's not such a big deal. Yes. So. But
even here in San Francisco, I still see a lot of people with home button iPhones. So that's people are happy with them. They like that comfort and stuff. So and if you replace the battery, it keeps going. So
yeah, that battery deal is no longer available. It ended at the end of last year.
Still better than it was though. It's like $50, isn't it?
So Isn't it $79
Oh,
now?
it's
It was
$79.
$50
I'm
off.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's $79 down, which still is, that's a lot cheaper than buying a new phone.
It's not $29.
But that's still a lot.
Right. Compared to $29, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah, that's crazy.
yeah.
So how much do we have an idea of how much it actually costs them to do? Like, at 29, were they losing money?
I think the report was they were losing money
They
on
had
that.
to have been. That's
Yeah. I mean, just on the labor time too. When you factor in all the parts, I don't think
Yeah.
the battery itself probably costs much more than 29. But they got to distribute them to all the stores, and then someone's got to actually pull apart your phone and put
Right.
it in.
I believe this was an actual gesture of goodwill from Tim Cook. We made a mistake. Let's fix it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, sort of damage control for, I mean, they were doing the right thing for the right reasons when they were saying, hey, we're going to slow down your phone, your older phone, if its battery wear is such that it doesn't deliver that peak voltage
Yeah.
to run at peak speeds. It was kind of misreported that they're slowing down all the old phones.
Yes.
Well, they're not if your battery's not worn.
Right.
But a lot of people's battery is worn after 2 years of charging and discharging.
Because you can imagine how much more angry people would have been if their phones just didn't work, and they were.
Yes.
That's why. But
They were.
if you
They
had
were
this
just
epidemic of phones,
People
not
were
working,
like, "Oh, come my phone just randomly restarts." Well,
Yes.
because it's trying to ramp up real high, and the battery can't deliver. Yeah,
so to fix
so,
the issue,
yeah,
this is basically the best they could have done.
yeah, they didn't, but they didn't communicate any of that well at all, and then they had to do all this damage control, and then
Yeah.
it maybe influenced upgrades. It certainly. Maybe it didn't influence upgrades in China, which is where they said there was a problem, but it may have prevented them from kind of making up that difference
Right.
in the
Right.
US and Europe where people are like, they were running all these like upgrade promo deals, get more money for your trade in and stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe those just weren't as successful as they otherwise would have been because everybody said, well, I just got a new battery.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, I'm looking this up, that the iPhone 10, 10s, or the 10s series and the 10R are $69 to replace the battery, but all the older ones are $49.
Oh, is
That's
that what
where I
the
was
price
thinking
is
of
now?
50.
So
That's where
okay.
remember when I said
Okay.
50? That's
I
where I got
stand
that.
corrected, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, so we actually we did a poll on Twitter yesterday to see what people did. We asked if people replaced their iPhone battery instead of buying a new phone.
Wow.
27% got the battery instead, 35% got an iPhone, not a battery, and 38% didn't do either. And a few people commented that, like Mr. McTaylor on Twitter, he said he got both. So, that's
Yeah,
something like I did, but although I was
Yes.
shopping for two people, but
But that's
Yeah.
still that one of those two was getting the battery instead.
yeah,
You would have bought two phones instead. So, yeah, that's a lot. That's a significant number. I know it's the Macworld Twitter readers, so it's
Right.
not, it's a little self-selecting, but 27% of, people who are enough of a fan to
Yeah.
get Macworld said, not only did I just I got a battery, but I got a battery and I would have gotten a phone instead, but I got the battery instead.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
So that's a significant chunk.
yeah. So, anyways,
I have a question. So
yes.
do you think
I was trying to think of a transition. I can.
Uh,
I was
that,
oh,
like-
I get AMD in this.
that having more people with older iPhones, we know that it does mean they don't sell newer ones, but do you think it expands Apple's overall market at all, or not really? Because then they could
Right.
turn that into services and make money elsewhere in the ecosystem if they can keep people at least on the iPhone.
This has been a big topic lately, as Apple has said, we're transitioning our company to make services a bigger part of the company
Yeah.
and a bigger part of our revenue, and they're launching new services and stuff like that. And we'll see new services launch over the next couple of years. People are speculating there'll be some health thing. We've got a big TV video thing they're obviously working on. And then, of course, there's all the iCloud stuff they sell, additional storage and everything. So I think Apple's never chased market share. per se.
Yeah.
They do want to sell products, but they've never been like, we have to be number one in market share. But I think that formula might change a little bit as they grow services, because that's their best inroads into services. Everybody
Yeah.
says, oh, as we talked about last week, putting their services on the smart TVs is because they're growing to a services business. Well, that's true, but still the number one way to sell more Apple services is to sell more iPhones.
Right.
More than Mac, more than anything else. People who get an iPhone end up getting Apple's services, and that's, I think, the best transition. So maybe once they launch more services and they have more of a service company, then it becomes less important to make profit on iPhones and more important to get market share to get people into those services.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it just hasn't happened yet.
One thing that I was trying to think this out, and I think I finally figured it out. What I wanted to say was, so one thing that I'd be interested in seeing is like iPhone sales in maybe 2 years, because theoretically,
Yes.
these older phones that people have replaced with battery will last 2 years more.
Yes.
Sure.
Then they'll get to that point where they'll want to upgrade, and if in 2 years, in 2021, we'll see like this steep increase in iPhone sales revenue, because those people who are like my son using the 6S Plus, his battery's finally, it's got that 2-year kind of down cycle going, and
Yeah.
it's time for
And
him to
there's
get a new phone.
some big gap in quality between his phone and whatever's the
Especially,
Right,
yeah.
right, and then the
2021
gap
one.
exactly. The gap is bigger now
Yes.
because it's now it's 4 years. So
So what you're saying is, in a year and a half, buy a bunch of Apple stock. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not a stock professional. I'm not an investor. What are they? Investment professional. So I hesitate to give stock advice. But there's something to look out for in like a year and a half, 2 years.
I can't
So-
tell if you're winking at the camera right now, Roman.
No, no.
People want to be like, are you winking or squinting?
I'm squinting. I'm squinting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You're gonna,
Something that be interesting to see that happens in 2 or 4 years on the Macintosh side is Apple switching processors. There have been rumors that Apple was working on doing its own processors for laptops, but Jason came up with a thought piece last week about why Apple should switch to AMD processors, and this has kind of been a topic that's been in the kind of Apple sphere for a while.
Yeah.
But now with the whole Apple making their own processors thing and Intel and their, I guess, performance issues, I don't know if it's really a controversy or not.
They've had some manufacturing problems with their 10 nanometer chips.
Yeah.
It's not really like a performance problem per se, but they've had a little setbacks. And then
Right.
AMD's been really kicking butt.
Yeah. So it's a little more of a top of mind kind of topic now. And Jason kind of brought it up. Do you want to elaborate on what you were thinking there, Jason, on this whole AMD?
I mean, I think the thing Apple has to do, I think a lot of people agree, is, I mean, they want to take control of their own destiny, number one, but number two, if they really want to innovate on the Mac and make it more different and something you can't get anywhere else, they need to make their own processors and all the little sub processors and stuff that go within it, all their machine learning stuff and everything else. And they kind of start to do that with the T2, but they just need to go all in. They can't do that all at once. They can't go from the MacBook, the 12-inch MacBook, to the Mac Pro with 18 or more cores for running, big workstation loads and stuff all in one. They can't make chips for all that at once. So it makes sense to start at the low end, the consumer end, that's all about battery life and low power, because their chips are most like that already now. The iPad Pro, the new iPad Pro's A12X, is already faster than what's in a MacBook, or a MacBook Air. So you start there, where the software is less of an issue too, because most of the stuff people are using are stuff that comes from Apple. They're using
Right.
Safari, and they're not using Premiere, they're not using Maya or 3D modeling programs or scientific modeling programs. And you start there transitioning Mac to Mac OS to ARM and putting your processors there. And then over the next couple of years, you build bigger, more powerful processors until all the Macs have Apple processors in them, and Mac OS is all on ARM, and all the developers of all the apps have updated all their stuff for ARM. In the meantime, though, I think they should kick Intel to the curb for AMD, at least on the desktop stuff, because AMD's Ryzen processors are better bang for the buck and just straight up better performance on the workstation side. The Threadripper stuff is way better than what they put in the iMac Pro or are expected to put in the Mac Pro for the kinds of workloads that Apple really cares about, which is all this creative professional stuff, as opposed to games. Games is not as big a
Right.
deal on Mac as it is on the PC. That's the only place AMD is not kicking Intel's butt is games. And this year they might even do that with games, because these third gen Ryzen stuff they just showed off at CES is looking really good.
I was just gonna say that Apple would definitely have to prioritize core count or thread count over clock speed, which has kind of been the debate on the Windows side.
For this, if they use today's processors, yes. But if they started it with the third gen Ryzen stuff that they just showed at CES, maybe not. We don't know what those clock speeds are, but just judging from what they've shown us, they may be neck and neck or better than Intel there. And Intel's new next generation core stuff, their Sunny Cove core and stuff, that's not expected until the end of this year, and then only in the ultralight laptops. The desktop stuff isn't expected till next year. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is when the time is right for them to explore that. Plus, we know how much we know how much Apple loves to dual source. They love to pit competitors against each other.
Right.
So they could say, Intel maybe on their laptops, maybe the laptops that they haven't put their own processors in yet, like the MacBook Pro, and then on the desktop, all the AMD. And they have such a relationship with AMD already, because they do all their discrete GPUs are AMD. They haven't done NVIDIA GPUs in a Mac in years. So there's a relationship there. The question is, could they do it?
And there's a question from Taylor that maybe you can answer is, can they double or triple the speed of A processors by adding active coding? Which I'm
Active coding?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means.
Neither am I.
I'll look that up.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that term.
While you're looking that up, just because we tend to have a more Apple, Mac, iOS based audience, they may not be familiar with how AMD and Intel works on the PC side. So PCs are
Right.
Intel and AMD based, but the user doesn't experience anything different, correct? Like there's nothing you have
Right.
to do to
The
make it work.
chips, they're both x86 and x64 instruction sets. Some of the Intel's got a few extensions that AMD doesn't have yet or something, but for the most part, if you write an app,
It'll
for-
work. Yeah.
it'll work.
Yes.
Your compiler will take care of some flags for some minor optimizations. Now, if you really want to super fine tune optimize, there's a little work you have to do, but it's nothing like, it's for ARM, like that. That's
Right.
a huge change. It's pretty much the same thing. So 99.9% of the apps would just work.
Yeah.
And developers who want to go in and really get the best out of those AMD processors, it's a few weeks worth of digging around doing some optimization work. It's not like, I've got to rewrite my whole app.
Right.
So McTaylor, actually, it was a typo and meant active cooling, not coding.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't
mean,
think
that's always-
but I don't think double or triple the speed.
Not nearly. No.
Yeah.
They could get probably 15 or 20%. I mean, there's just a ceiling on how high you can crank clock speeds. And there's a nonlinear relationship between the clock speeds and the sort of voltage and power that they end up using. So even if you could just like really ramp up the clock speeds on an active cooled like A12X, you would also start to really chew into its biggest benefit of battery life. But they don't need to. They're already in their power, in the power profile we're talking about, in the stuff for a MacBook Air or something like that. They're already talking about being faster than Intel's chips, right? So making one for a MacBook Pro and then moving up to the iMac Pro or something like that, you could never power an iMac Pro with an A12X just by throwing a bunch of active cooling on there and just cranking the clock speeds way up. You definitely need to make a bigger, more powerful chip to satisfy that market.
So one thing that you brought up in your article is that AMD processors are cheaper than Intel processors.
Yeah.
But somehow I don't think that savings will necessarily be passed on to the consumer.
No,
because
you
Apple
would
likes its
hope-
margins.
Yeah, but that's one reason Apple might do it.
Right,
is because
right,
they love their margins and it gives them more margin.
right.
And it's margin they can spend elsewhere. Like they might
True,
determine we want to make $1,000 worth of profit on the Mac Pro. And then if they're saving, we're talking about the workstation chips here. So a Threadripper can be hundreds of dollars less than the Xeons that they're competing with.
Yeah.
Just that. And they could give you some more RAM, they could give you a bigger hard drive, they could do something like that and still make their big fat margin. So there's ways they could give more to the consumer, or they could just pocket that money.
Right.
That's
So
what I like doing.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, it's interesting thing that
I should mention, I don't think for a minute that it'll happen.
Yeah, I've been thinking that this whole time.
it's
yeah.
funny though, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
certainly
that's
on the
exactly why
desktop.
it wouldn't happen.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, on laptops, you can make a much different argument. The AMD's not, really kicking Intel's butt in laptop chips in the same way, and that's the area that Intel's sort of innovating in the most, is in those thin and light laptops. So even if they weren't replacing with their own chips in laptops, you could see them going, okay, Intel's for the thin and light laptops, and then all our desktop stuff is AMD, and that would be fine. That wouldn't cause like developer worry or anything.
Yeah.
But would it cause, Apple's had this long relationship with Intel? Do you think that,
Right.
that they would say, that would cause some animosity right there? It was like, well, why
Totally.
aren't you using this for the iMac? Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, it totally would. Which is, I mean, I think Apple historically seems to like that kind of thing. Like, well, give us a better price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it's leverage. To get better parts, better price, something like that.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Be interesting to see how this develops, how the whole ARM thing develops. I mean, this is a long-term thing that's going to happen, or that we think is going to happen. It just seems the signs are there that it will happen.
It'll be really curious to see what they do in the Mac Pro.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Because
that
if
was
if they put the latest Xeon in it, which is kind of what I expect, that'll be fine until this fall when those Threadripper things come out. You're going to be looking at a PC that can run Premiere way faster than a Mac Pro.
Yeah.
I mean, already you could dollars for dollars. You're like, yeah, you pay a premium for the Apple stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's slower. But it could be considerably slower.
Yeah.
And time is money for a lot of these, pro workload stuff. So there might be leaving some serious performance on the table
Yeah.
on those works. I mean, if AMD comes out with a 64 core, 128 thread, 3rd gen Threadripper this fall, which is a very distinct possibility. I mean, it's kind of what people expect. It's what the EPYC server chips that they're based on are going to be doing. Yeah, that could just kick the snot out of any, I don't know, 32 core, whatever Intel can do. Intel right now is maxing out at 18 cores in those workstation Xeons. Even if they up that, they may not be able to compete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. WWDC. We'll see this June.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that'll be an indicator of what Apple's doing with its hardware. So It'd be interesting to see. So, there are a few other little news items that came out over the past week that, we could kind of just hit quickly. Like this morning, there was CNBC came out with a report that Apple has been talking to private Medicare plans about subsidizing the Apple Watch. So seems interesting because Apple or Tim Cook was on. He did an interview recently and kind of emphasized how the Apple Watch, their health is kind of their big thing now for the Apple Watch.
Yeah, he said that if he believes that Apple will be remembered for any one thing, it'll be health. So I thought that was an interesting quote.
Yeah,
Yes.
an apple a day.
That makes me think that they have a lot of that they're going to be doing a lot in health beyond what they're doing now.
Right.
They're not doing. I mean, look, fall detection and the heart rate stuff and ECG.
Right.
It's great. No doubt. But it's not the kind of thing where it's like Apple's going to be remembered for this contribution to health. So, but there's always been they're working with your health records in Apple Health. There's been talk of like they want to do more with healthcare. They might actually have their own Apple Healthcare for Apple employees.
Right.
And everybody's like, well, they'll roll it out all over the country. I don't think Apple's going to sell health insurance, but I think there's more. I think there's some sort of service coming, some sort of health service. Who knows what that would be?
Yeah. It's
I mean, our audience is probably not the best question, but I was just to ask this, but I was just thinking about how, like, would you trust Apple with your healthcare information, and would you trust Google with your healthcare information?
I would trust Apple more than Google. Yeah.
I would trust, definitely Apple more than Google. I think either one would have to be HIPAA compliant, and I think that locks down stuff enough.
yeah.
So you would trust that?
Yeah,
at that point.
I don't think either one of them could offer a significant product that uses your health records or health information that's not HIPAA compliant. Anything outside of like exercise tracking your heart rate and stuff. Once they get into your actual, what diseases do you have? What medications do you have? Take stuff like that. If you're not HIPAA compliant, you are dead in the water.
Right.
And HIPAA's pretty, stringent about privacy and security of your health records. So.
Yeah. Apple announced yesterday, or they didn't actually formally announce it. They just kind of released it on their website that battery cases for the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR are now available. They're $129.
Yep.
The one thing about the Apple battery cases is that
they're ugly.
I don't get it. Why are they so dang ugly? So, I mean, Apple's just, supposed to be into the design and everything, and yet they come out with this case and you kind of go, what? Huh?
I do actually like the regular silicon case, but in general, if they're cases, I kind of get the impression that they're like, oh, we got to do this. People want this thing. Let's just do it. Yeah. So it's not like they put their heart and soul into it like they do the rest of their devices.
They do that weird thing where it's slim down part of the back, and then there's the bump where the battery is. Instead of just making it the whole back flat and just thicker, like Mophie and stuff does, like the other guys do.
One thing I forgot to put in my article yesterday is that the new ones are a little bit more tapered, so that's a little bit nicer, but it's still kind of ugly.
Yeah, they support wireless charging, which is nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
The thing they do that none of the third-party ones do is they have a lightning connector.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the third-party ones leave a hole so that you can access your own lightning connector, but to charge the battery pack themselves, they're all like USB-C or micro USB. Yeah. But there's someone I think from Wirecutter got one already early, and they're much lower capacity than the old ones.
Oh man,
like half, like 1,300 milliamp hours instead of over 2,000, or
I'm gonna have to update that.
At least that's the iPhone XS one. I don't know if they got the XR one or anything. So they don't. I mean, Apple doesn't really state the capacity on the site. They just say like gives you this many hours of talk time, which I don't know what that
Right.
means.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, no one knows that.
nobody makes phone calls and they go, "It's 10 hours of talk time," and I go, "That's not a useful metric." Right?
Yeah, that's right. When I wrote the article, I focused on the internet use. They gave that stat too.
Yeah, that's a better stat. So they give that stuff, and it's not. So it's apparently a lot less than it used to be.
Yeah.
And wow, that's
So
And expensive, ugly, and
129, yeah.
small. But in terms of like seamlessly working with your product,
Right.
Lightning and Qi wireless charging and stuff like that, one of the best.
and you can see in the in the notification center, you can see the battery level as you would with the AirPods. and
Exactly,
stuff.
right,
Yes.
right. Yeah.
That battery widget.
So, the 2019 iPhone rumor mill is starting to churn. So, there have been a few renders of the 3-camera system for the iPhone.
God, it's ugly. I hope it's
Another. Speaking of ugly,
That first one where like it's a big square in the corner with like offset lenses. I can't imagine that they will do that, but
It looks like one of those third-party peripherals that you kind of tack on to the
Yes.
lens. Yes. So
the sites that posted these renders emphasize that these were early prototypes. So
yeah, they say these are renders of legit, like Apple's actually considering this, but
yeah.
that they have multiple prototypes and these are the different prototypes.
The thing I find odd about these renders, though, is that aren't these renders? They're essentially current iPhone photos that look like that have the cameras stuck onto them. Do you know what I mean? They're not. I thought maybe they would be original renders of different. Do you know what I mean?
They might be. I'm not sure if they're shopped original.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm
Or
trying to
if
say.
they're-
They look like shopped current
Yeah.
iPhone photos. If they were renders of prototypes, I would think that they would be different positions, or
Yeah, I see
the
what
renders
you
would
mean.
look a little more original than they do now. So I'm not, I guess
There is a whole cottage industry of people making stuff
Yes.
to look like
Yes.
Apple's stuff. Like
Yeah.
you always see these designers who make iOS 13 feature videos where it's
Yeah.
like their imagining of what is going to be in it, and it
Right.
looks like an Apple video. Like they really
Right.
nail the zooms and transitions and animation and stuff. I think half the
It's
time
all
those
video.
are all sort of resumes.
Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like,
Yes.
please hire me.
right. They're being submitted for a job. So yeah.
And
Another announcement was that DuckDuckGo is now using Apple Maps. I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, they used to use OpenStreetMap, and now they've switched to Apple Maps because one of those things Apple didn't really publicize a lot, but they announced at last year's WWDC that there's this thing called MapKit.js, which is a JavaScript library to let you put Apple Maps on your websites, and it's free with a limited number of API calls for anyone who's a developer. You need more, you have to work out a business deal. Apparently that's what DuckDuckGo is doing.
I'm still not fully happy with Apple Maps, and I live in what is literally the best place to use it.
Yeah.
And it's, there was something that it gave me, not a very good route to go to that place the other day, and I was like, man, compared to Google Maps, and I
Speaking
want
of
to get
routes, DuckDuckGo does not do directions with Apple Maps.
Right.
It will kick open your Maps app on an iOS device or a Mac. On another device, it'll open Bing or Google. You'll just a little drop down menu of what you want to do. But if you want directions, it doesn't use Apple Maps, which is part of MapKit. So the MapKit.js. So maybe they just haven't done it yet or something. I don't know.
And I thought we'd wrap up this episode of the Macworld podcast with the story that will never die. And that is, or the product that will never die, and that is the Apple AirPower. So
supposedly it's coming.
supposedly
Yeah.
it is coming. There was a story. Was it last week or was it even longer than that?
I think it was last week.
Last week, I think.
Yeah, about how Apple has kind of figured out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And that it could be coming soon. And then there was a story that came out, I think it was this morning, about how the Malaysian Apple site mentions AirPower
Huh.
in its battery case product description. The before mentioned battery
Well, AirPower was mentioned in the new.
Yeah, and the
iPhone
documentation for the iPhone. Yeah.
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 So
They
maybe
but
we'll
they
see it.
the rumor is it's in production now,
Yeah.
which means
This
could
is one of
come
those
when
things. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah. So
I
maybe
wonder
we'll
if
see
they
it.
just kind of if it's just like these battery cases where they just kind of
yeah.
put
Right.
it live on the
It just
site and
shows
don't tell.
up.
It just shows up and they don't tell anyone. At this point, it's embarrassing. Just
Right.
put it on the site.
Yeah.
And not.
I thought about putting in that in there yesterday, but I figured that would be too much.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, there hasn't been any like last year. There were rumors of there was the educate. When was the education event? Was
I think
that
it was March.
last
It was
year?
March.
Yeah, there hasn't been any rumors of a event before between now and WWDC. So maybe maybe it would just show up on Apple's website sometimes. So, but yeah, if you've been holding out for AirPower, your wait may be over sooner than later.
And after this embarrassing wait, I would be willing to bet that's how they're going to do it. It's just going to appear because they don't want the embarrassment of fanfare.
What do you think it'll cost?
149.
Yeah.
That sounds right
It
to me.
sounds. Oh, I'm gonna even go like 169.
Oh, I would buy
Yeah.
it. Believe it or not, I wouldn't buy it at 169, but I would buy it at 149.
But
I don't
what is
think
it?
I'd
How
buy
much is
either.
a good? How much does a good charger go about nowadays? Like
$50.
50
A
bucks.
good wireless charger
Yes.
to charge one thing.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't put your phone and your watch and your new AirPods with the wireless case,
Right.
charging case, all on it at the same time. But you can, one good Qi charger is $50.
yeah. So 3 times that is 150.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, and let's add a little margin.
It's not even a good way to charge your watch
No, it's
most of the time because if you don't have a band that unclasps and lays flat,
right.
you can't really lay it on a flat pad. You have to
Yeah.
put it on a. So
And see, that's what's been worrying me because I have one of those Mophie wireless chargers, and I would hope that it would work, but the Apple Watch does not charge with it. So you actually have to use the little circular one, and it's annoying. So if you're a constant Apple Watch user and you have an iPhone, obviously that would be really nice to have a pad that actually works for both of them. Yeah.
So I think that just about does it for this week's episode of the Macworld podcast, episode 636. So I'd like to thank Jason on the remote. Thanks, Jason.
thank you.
Thank Leif.
Thank you, Roman.
Thanks to our producer, Dan.
You're welcome.
Join us next week. We usually broadcast Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific. If there's a time change, we'll let you know on the website. Check the website, macworld.com, for topics. Of course, if you have any comments or questions that aren't necessarily related to the topics, we're happy to hear them. Join us next week on Twitter and on YouTube. See you next week.
Later.